Good morning or night, whichever the case may be. This is Sharon Alexander with Art with Alexander, and we're continuing where we left off with the dragonfly in lotus position. It's a little bit darker than it was before because we are having clouds and occasional rain, but what I'm seeing on the screen looks just fine, so we're going to keep on going. Last time I had this up here, we had the starting of the blossom here. We had a little bit of background. And we're working on these wings. So I'm going to get my 10-0 Aqua Elite Princeton brush. And I'm fairly certain we were using cadmium light red. So we're going to get some more water and we're going to go back to getting those details into the wings on the cadmium light red. Found a interesting musical group for my copyright-free music today called Jericho. It sounds promising so far. We'll see how we like it when we're a little further in. They apparently have several copyright-free videos. So, if you like this, go on YouTube and see if you can find Jericho for yourself. We're just going to follow these lines, and I'll go ahead and bring our drawing over here so that you can see the lines I'm kind of working towards. We've got long lines that kind of curve off to the side of the wings here, and they're intersected by lines that do not connect. We are not making brick walls here. We are making the internal structure of dragonfly wings. And it looks like we stopped on those lines over here, so we're going to go ahead and put those lines on the other side, since we kind of stopped in the middle of the wing because our time was up. Now, some of you might be wondering, I've seen YouTubes that last for 3 hours, 5 hours. Well, that's nice. You can always put this on a playlist and spend the entire time watching the whole process from beginning to end. Nothing wrong with that. I spam or use videos like that all the time, especially if I really want to know something. But for those of us who don't always have as much time and aren't as good at managing our time, an hour. An hour is enough time to get maybe not a whole project done, but certainly a good long time to see it. I hear a rabbit down there doing zoomies. She loves art time because art time is playtime for her. Here we go. We don't want those lines to just go straight across. We want them to go in between the lines. My English has evaporated today. There's a word for that. We don't want consecutive lines, we want non-consecutive lines. We don't want them to intersect, because these structures on dragonfly wings are what give them the strength they need to fly far and fast. The one problem with little bitty brushes, we get nice little bitty lines, but they don't hold that much paint, and if you get too much paint on them, they'll get sloppy. And they'll have these great big old fat lines when what you really wanted was delicate, thin lines. Just enough detail to say, yep, there is definitely something there. Been an interesting week. I haven't done much with most of it because this entire week was International Moth Day. Sounds really nice. I like moths. I did do a quick tutorial with Sketchbook School. They do YouTubes and Facebook with Danny on Thursdays. My time in Central here, that's at about 11 o'clock. And he does different things. really nice watch. But he was doing, oh, I can't remember the name of the really big moth, but he also did the Luna moth. I love Luna moths. So that one's slated. Having some nice ideas for that later. We might even do that at some point. And today in particular is, I believe, International Tiger Day. I went and found a beautiful picture of a tiger from Upsplash, I think is where I ended up getting it. And it's a tiger of a different color. It's got kind of reddish brown markings, and this tiger itself is actually kind of cream colored with blue eyes. Absolutely gorgeous. It's sitting in such a cute position because it's kind of resting on the stump. Don't have it printed or anything, but if I decide to do that picture later, I will definitely be sharing it. And the name of the guy who took the picture, because I don't remember his name offhand, but he was from India. Okay, so we've got details in our wings now. We've got details on our body, and we could add some of these highlights to things like the eyes and the face. Let's go ahead and do that. We had some light highlights. I've got some nickel titanium azo. I think this was the Woolwich one, so it's a lot closer to being gouache than it is to being watercolor, which will be perfect because we've got two light highlights on either one of these eyes at the top. So we're just going to add that to the top here, a little light highlight on top of those eyes, because the rest of the highlights are actually shadows on these eyes. You don't really see it. Well, you do, but you see it as a darkness instead of a lightness, so lightness. Did that work here? Huh? It's going to work today because I just said it. Okay. And our face here is a little bit on the reddish side, so I'm going to get a little bit of this Van Dyke brown because we don't want it to be too obvious, but we do want these facial lines here. There's one going down where the mouth would be, and there's one going up this way. We've also got this line of turquoise here. So I'm going to put just a little V here where his face had that. Clean this off. I don't exactly have turquoise, but Artesa's set here does have jade, which is close enough. Oh, except that I just remembered we're not doing the turquoise colored butterfly. We're using all the red colors. So on the picture of the turquoise one, the eyes match the body, so let's get some more of that cadmium red. And next to that darker line, whoops, that's a little bit, maybe see that, that's, here we go, let me see if we can get the focus, but we're not going to get the focus. Just trust me if there's a blob at the end of this, and that's not going to help us. There we go, got some of that off. There's a little line of color right on the inside upper portion of that V shape. So let's put that bit of red right there. Okay. Now we've got our highlights up there. Let's get some of those darker shadows. For the turquoise one, those are black. We don't want to get too dramatic. So how about using, let's use some sepia. Use a thicker sepia or sepia. I guess it depends on who's saying it. We've got a dot and a line and another little line here at the curvature of these eyes. So curvature there, curvature here. Probably we'll go back with a little water and soften that some. And there's a little bit of a highlight right there. Now let's kind of soften that just a bit. Spread it out some so it doesn't look like just a line on the page. And that's not really working. Okay, there's one of those mistakes we talk about. Let's soak some of that up. Maybe just make it a little more of a shade. Because we don't want to go over that one highlight we've got there. But now we have to make the other side work too. Now, even though I've got a reference here, I'm only vaguely following it. Because if I really wanted to just follow it, I could say, forget this, go find that dragonfly, that red dragonfly, and set up a photograph. No need to paint it. But that's not what we're doing. We want to paint this. We want to make this our own. We want to give it our own style and our own technique. And that means painting. Because otherwise we could just go take a photograph. Pictures are really good these days. We could just do a little micro photograph. We wouldn't have to go through all this trouble. Just like we could have somebody print the pieces of a quilt onto fabric and just make a blanket out of it. We don't have to spend hours or days quilting a quilt, but it's never the same. I have seen a few of those and they give you the look, but when you go to look at it up close, you think, oh, that's just not the same thing. Okay. Oh, almost forgot. I put my brush up, but we got to put in some legs. We got to put some legs in here. So, let's use that same sepia, and this time if we are not going to dilute it like we did our eyes up here. I am probably going to put that line back in there and just there. Put that line back in there. It's going to fuzz a bit now because it's wet, and that's fine. Okay. And now we're going to make the legs. We've got legs and they're crossing over each other and they're hugging plant parts. So let's start with the one that comes out in front. Comes out just about here on that eyeball. And it comes out at a different angle. Here we go. So we're going to put that leg out there. And then it came back and just kind of hugged that. And gotta let that leg dry some. So let's go ahead and work on other legs. For instance, we've got a leg in the background back here. Another leg back there. And we're gonna bring in the leg that comes down here. And then kind of hugs the plant a bit. That little foot on there. And we had just a little foot that came out from down here. I'm guessing the leg's hidden behind the other leg we've got on here already. Okay, that's one side. Get some more paint on here. And we've got a leg that comes down, two legs actually. One of them comes down behind here. And then comes that leg down there. And it comes down to the flower. And then we've got the foot right there. And one more leg. One more leg that comes straight down through here. So basically all we see is just continuation of the line we just made. And since I just made this at a slightly different angle, we're going to make it so we can see that leg. Okay, let's go back to working on that flower a bit. I'm going to switch over to my squirrel hair number 4. And we were using Prussian green for the background. What were we using there? Oh, that's right, we were using Viridian, the name of the green that I could not remember for anything last time. And I'm going to move this back here again for now. So yes, Viridian. Couldn't remember the name for anything. And my Viridian's kind of old and I've got it on this plate here. So here comes the next cheat. Instead of taking a bunch of water on a brush and dripping it in there constantly, I've got a spray bottle of water, which doesn't like to go straight down. So I'm just going to tip the plate up a bit, squirt some water in there. Probably should give it a minute or so to work itself up, but we're not going to because we're doing this on time. So we're just going to start getting some paint here. And just like before, we've got a little bit of this edgy color here, so we're going to start at the bottom of this one and pull it up, but leave that edge. I'm going to leave that edge because I'm going to, while it's still wet, get that green off there. Reach over here and get some violet. And we're going to drip that onto the edge. Make sure that they touch and collide and make that pretty bluey green color in between. Okay. And I'm going to get some more Viridian. Although technically, since this is a cheaper set, this probably isn't really Viridian. This is probably Viridian Hue, which is phthalo green. And we're going to get that other flowers petal up there. Had a funny incident with part 2. Went through all the trouble to make the video, and then when I went to post it for everybody to see, I couldn't find it. Couldn't find it on that phone anywhere because I am using my little Samsung phone to do these recordings. Don't have a fancy camera or anything like that. Couldn't find it. Oh, so disappointed. I thought I'd have to do it all over again. Thought I'd have to start the whole painting again, since it would be really strange to just start the painting after the painting was already well and started. Let's get that purple on the edge here. So then I was doing some other things on my Facebook and Instagram, and I saw a video. What's this? Sure enough, it was the missing hour and 7 minutes of video from last time. So I was able, got a little dry right here. I'm going to add a little water so it'll mix some. But there it was. And that's how we got part 2 up. Let's hope I'm a little better this time at it. Now at this point we could leave it like this, or we could add some layers. We've got a lot of granulation going on through here. We've got darker areas. We've got a rabbit who thinks that chewing on things in storage under the desk is a good idea, and it's not. Stop that. Go find something else to play with. So, also we could put some shading in here. So, how about that? We'll put a little bit of shading in here while we're at it. We're going to put an extra layer. We'll start on this leaf, or this petal, because we don't want to work on petals that are close to each other. We don't want to work on petals that are touching, or the work from one petal will bleed into the work on the next petal. So, first we're going to go ahead and add an extra layer to this. We're going to darken up that purple. Maybe not that much dark. Let's get some water and wash some of that off. And just spread it with water. Get them to touch each other and meet and mingle like goers at a party. Not like the ones who stand on the wall, but the ones who actually go and mingle and do their thing. And I'm going to get a little bit of Payne's Gray, just a little bit. And I'm going to tuck it in. It's not dark enough. I'll be really glad when I use up all these old ones and can start moving into the good ones. But I'm going to just gently drop a little bit of this Payne's Gray into the corners so that we get a little bit of shading in all these places where we would have shading from meeting the next door petals. A little bit of shading. It's only pretty light. Using the back of my hand here, back of my thumb, to see if that's dry enough to work there, and that seems to be. Probably should have waited on the legs just a little bit, but I didn't. So we're just going to move on and hope those don't smear. And we're going to put some more of that phthalo green on this petal. Because we're going to do the same thing with this petal that we did with the others. We're putting another layer of this phthalo green, viridian hue, depending on how you want to look at it. I'm going to get some more of that violet. Also, I noticed in the other video, when I went back to watch it, that my pencil jar made some really, really loud clanking noises. I apologize for that. I have got a piece of foam from the craft section that I'm going to cut and drop into the bottom of that, and hopefully that will solve that problem in the future, because that was really loud. I don't know about you, but I didn't really appreciate it, so sorry about that. Little side project that I don't have any pictures of here. I sometimes also flip furniture. I've got a antique cabinet. I think it might have been a dresser. It had a mirror with it at some point that I was given to work with. All the veneer was coming off of it, and so I stripped all that off. Painted it dark teal, and I am currently putting layers and layers of stenciled on gold ginkgo biloba leaves. It's turning out pretty nice. Hopefully I'll have that done the next week or so. Might even do some ginkgo biloba leaves for the paints at some point. Depending on how much time we have when we're done, I may pull out that flower and show what a second layer of those paints on the flower petals could look like. Because I've got a second layer on at least 2 petals, and it looks pretty cool. Let's see. It's still pretty damp. Excuse me. So I kind of need this to dry a little bit. If I knew how to edit things, I could cut forward a few minutes, but I don't know how to edit things. I haven't figured that out yet. New channel, new thing for me. I will eventually figure things like that out. Of course, if I figure things like that out fairly soon, I might even edit out just what I said, just so that nobody hears me say it. But I doubt it, so you're probably going to hear that. I don't know what I'm doing. That's right, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm going to do it anyway, because we learn by doing. Well, most people do anyway. Maybe some people can do it by just reading a book and going on with it, but I've always been a lot better if I can either do it or do it with somebody, which of course is the point of videos, so that we can watch somebody else do it. Yay us! Watching somebody else do it. And learning as we go along. And hopefully this is fun. Who knows, maybe I'm even helping people who have less figured out than I do. That's the hope anyway. At the very least, let's hope we're entertaining. Because if we're not entertaining, nobody's going to want to watch this. Isn't that right, Bessie? Yeah, she's over here nodding her little fuzzy head. Yeah, Mom, that's right. And fly. Wanting to make tracks on our paper. Can't have that now. Let's see, what can we get away with here? Because this is just done. It's still pretty damp. That's not too bad, but this we just did. If we try to work on the background, we're going to have green and purple run all over our background. So how about we take a moment and decide something about that background. Put my brush up, and I'll try to be careful not to clank too much. But let's do a little background on the back. Let's get those pencils back out. And we've got Prussian blue going. So this is Artese's pencil, and this is Aegean. Would that be Aegean or Aegitan? It's hard to say, but it's A106. And it's not real sharp, but we're going to use it anyway. So let's assume that this is on a water lily pad. And we're just going to trace a little water lily pad out here. Kind of flattened. Because we want a lot of this to be darker. And let's trace out some of the vein work here. You probably won't be able to see that because if I do it too dark, these lines will still show up even though this is a watercolor pencil. And most of the watercolor pencil will disappear once it gets wet. That's one reason I really love watercolor pencils for exactly this sort of thing. I can trace on some extra work I want to do here and not worry about it showing when I'm done without having to sit there and erase. It's always nice not to have to sit there and erase because I'd forget. And then I'd look back and say, oh, I've got lines all over the place. I can't erase it now because it's covered in paint, and the paint makes sure that you cannot erase. Solution: watercolored pencils. They get wet, they disappear. No more problem. And I've got quite the selection because I like to do those pencils in the same colors I want to work in. Not unlike some of the children's coloring books where they put the colors in that they want the kids to use. Of course, the kids don't always follow those colors, so, you know. But it's a nice idea. Okay, and I'm going to be careful so that we don't have that giant clank. There we go. We've got that. Maybe actually give me that back. What if we put a suggestion of some of the things behind it? Maybe another lily pad over here, or maybe some more buds. I mean, I don't want to add extra colors. I want this to be the focus, but it'd be nice, maybe. Nah. I can always try that in a different rendition. But that has given me a little time. That's a little bit drier. That's a little bit drier. This is still pretty juicy. Probably can get away with the smaller one. Let's see, check that edge. Yeah, it's still pretty wet. You don't need the purple on the bottom part there. I bet. Now you'll notice I am not touching with the bottoms of my fingers. You do not want to touch your artwork with the bottoms of your fingers because human beings naturally produce their own oil. And if you're healthy, there would be salt mixed in with this oil as well. Salt won't really make a huge difference, but the oils will deter your paints from going where the paint needs to go, which is a problem when you don't want spots of paint that refuse to behave themselves. Don't want that. So I'm always very, very careful not to touch the paper with my fingers if I can help it. Always the back of the fingers. Backs of the fingers, they put out a little bit of oil, but not nearly as much as you're going to find on your fingertips or the palms of your hands, or even the soles of your feet. Because, yep, your feet do the same thing. It's why when you walk across a concrete floor on a hot summer's day, you leave behind footprints. At least until they evaporate. It's also why your shoes get nasty. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a chance because we're not going to wait on this all day. This is live footage because I don't know how to cut things. Maybe one of my tech-savvy friends will help me with that someday. In the meantime, we're just going to have to be careful. I'm going to pull that green up a little bit more. I think I could use a bit more green up there. And get some of that violet. That violet on that tip. You're probably also wondering why I haven't gone and put any lines in this. when my drawing obviously had lines on the petals. Well, I could go for that level of detail if I really, really, really wanted to. That's what that little tiny brush is for. Some more of that Payne's Gray for the shadows, which I didn't add on top. Might probably go back and add those on top. What was I saying? I've lost my thread. It said lost my mind, but I lost that a long time ago. I don't ever expect it to come back. Fortunately, this is kind of instinctual for me, so I don't need my mind to paint. Here. I'm sure some of you are laughing and probably going to put in the comments what I was talking about, and maybe I'll answer that and finish that thought. Okay, let's see. Maybe that side's pretty dry now. It didn't run noticeably, so I could probably get away with doing this petal down here. A little bit thicker consistency. But that one's pretty light. Oh, there we go. Nice dark. A couple of different ways I could add shade to this. I chose to use Payne's Gray, which is a gray with a lot of blue to it. Some people might call it a cool gray. A very dark cool gray. Some people will insist on mixing their own grays, and it could be anything. Dark gray, cool gray, a little bit of mixture of the two. I kind of like the consistency of the Payne's Gray. I don't mind having different shades show up in my grays occasionally, but I like consistency in my colors. I spent a long time before I got into painting watercolors doing pencil. Not watercolor pencil, but just regular colored pencil. A habit that I haven't done in a while, but I am planning to get back into that, so there may be some colored pencil videos in the future. They won't be as good as some of the colored pencil artists who can make things that look like photographs. It's just not my style. Like I said earlier, if I wanted a photograph, I'd just go get the subject and take a photograph. I admire their dedication and skill. It's just not my thing. It'd be like me going to an abstract artist and saying, why don't you make that so that I have some clue what in the world you were painting? Kind of rude, isn't it? So I don't do that. I don't always understand or like abstract art, but I'm not going to sit there and criticize someone who enjoys making it. If you enjoy making that kind of art, you go right ahead. Now what I'm going to do, because we're waiting for these to dry a little bit more, especially this one I just did, and that, I'm going to do this at the bottom a little differently, because we're going to put a suggestion down there, but we can start to darken this background, because I'm not leaving it that bright white blue type thing there. Prussian blue is really pretty and all, but that's not what I'm aiming for in this light tone. So I'm going to start darkening that. Get my Prussian blue for my set. Prussian green. Is it Prussian blue or Prussian green? I forgot now. It's Prussian green. Nice peacock color as far as I'm concerned. Now this one's really dark, so switch over here. Don't expect most of you to be able to do that, but we're going to start darkening up this background. Put a second layer of that beautiful Prussian blue-green, dark teal, whatever you feel like calling it. Just because the palette calls it one color doesn't mean you have to. Carefully around our edges here. So what I'm doing now is called wet on dry, because the paper is dry and my brush is quite decidedly wet. And you're going to spread this paint around so that we can get a nice, hopefully even background. Probably have to finagle the legs around those legs a little bit, but it's okay. It's okay. The key to this is not to let your edges dry. Because if your edge is dry, you're going to have a hard edge as opposed to a nice flowy edge that fade out. And we don't want fade out anyway because we're trying to make a solid background. Something that complements this blue-green blossom. And the pretty purple tips. Keep edge soft. We'll get hard edges, and we don't want hard edges. We want this to keep on flowing all the way around the page. Get in with our dragonfly here, so you're going to have to be really careful not to get a bunch of this teal on top of that red, or it'll change our colors and they'll look strange. Certainly won't be that orangey red cadmium color that we chose for this dragonfly. Okay, I'm going to switch hands again so that I can get up into the angle of the wing. That went well. Keep those edges wet. We're getting a little pooling and a little puddling here, but that's okay. It'll give us a little bit of texture in the background. Nothing wrong with a bit of texture in the background. It might even give the suggestion that there are other things in the background. Okay, another one of those fun, finicky angles. That we want to be careful so that we don't just fly off and go onto our wings. And got a little bit of that drawing going on here. It's creating a lighter spot. Fix that around the edge of that wing. Keep our edges wet. Don't want those edges to dry. Ooh, almost got too much water. Good thing it didn't drip on my page. Control, control. We must learn control. Which is funny because even though we do have control over the watercolors are not acrylics. They don't always go where you want them to. They don't always do what you want them to. The trick is to figure out how to coax them into doing what you want them to do and to correct them when they step out of line. Not unlike children. I mean, could you imagine perfect children that never stepped out of line, never did anything wrong, never said anything wrong, always did everything perfectly because that's the way you said to do it, no other reason? Yeah, watercolors are a lot like kids. They don't always do what you expect them to do, and sometimes they do unexpected things that you think, now why on earth did it do that? Why did it do that? Why did it go there? Why did it do that? Well, we could scream at the kids. And who knows? Maybe we'd get the results we wanted. Maybe we could ham-fistedly just throw more paint at the page. Probably wouldn't really like the results as much. End up with a psychopath paint. That's scary. Psychopathic paint. Serial killer paint. Multiple personality paint. Who knows? Because everything that kids grow up to do usually has some basis in their childhood, and the way we treat our paint has a huge difference in how it's going to behave. Throw too much water at it, it's going to run all over the place, and it's not going to be smooth, and it's going to do weird things. Probably things we're not going to like. Gentle touch. That's the way to work with watercolor. Push it in the direction you want it to go. And hopefully, it'll listen to you, so to speak. Obviously, as a paint, it's not got ears or brain. Yes, rabbit. But it will still listen, so to speak, and move in directions you want it to go. If you use that gentle touch, don't get impatient, and just see what it wants to do and push it in the direction you want it to go. It really does work. That doesn't mean that we're going to get it perfect every time. There's always things we don't understand, that we don't see. And the paint will still act weird sometimes and not do what we want. Maybe it's too hot in the room and the paint dries too fast. Maybe it's too cold. Maybe there's too much humidity and it takes forever for it to dry and mature so that we can keep on working with it. Maybe there's extra little pieces of color in it that we weren't expecting. Little personality quirks we didn't see to start with. Maybe it's not good paint. Maybe it's flawed paint. I know I've got several paints here that at the time I either bought or was given them, I didn't understand the difference between good paint and cheap paint. And I'm also very cheap, so I refuse to just throw such things away, so finding uses for them. Like the burnt umber that came from a company called Woolrich. Never heard of it. I have since found out that this used to be a company, kind of a chain store, and that the quality of paint is probably even worse than Crayola's. I have to say, sorry Crayola, but I've been really disappointed in your colored pencils the last time I bought them for my kids. I've had nothing but complaints from my kids about the wooden sheaths around them just cracking when they try to sharpen them. So if somebody from Crayola hears this, my kids are mad at you and they want their pencils fixed. Especially my son. He's being quite vocal about it. He's extremely picky about his art supplies for an 8-year-old. Finally went and got him a couple of different brands to try out, and he found one that sharpened to his satisfaction. So he's fairly happy at the moment. There we go. And we've got all kinds of blooms and streaks and things in the background here. Kind of adds character to it though. So let's move on a little bit. Let's look at this underpainting here, or this leaf. Let's see, how is this doing? Oh yeah, we can probably work with that now. I'm going to go ahead and keep this larger brush I pulled out, and neglected to mention this is a number 8 squirrel hair. So I'm going to get that phthalo green viridian hue color back on. We're going to hit this big petal with a little bit more paint than what was in that particular stroke. Here we go. Let's spread that lovely bluey green out. Spread. A bit more paint. And I've gone quiet. Apparently I haven't had enough coffee today. Put that up there. some of that lovely violet. All violets are not created equal. Because while Arteza may not be everyone's go-to when they're looking for professional paints, I really haven't had any problem with these. I'm not quite sure what would make them less than, say, Rembrandt or Daniel Smith or any of the others, other than simply price on their price tag. They seem to be nice and vibrant. They go on nicely. I haven't had any problem with graininess. I will admit that they're, what do they call that color? Their Persian red and their fern green color they've got, they're a little chalky. They're certainly not as opaque as others, but maybe they're not supposed to be. I haven't tried colors from other brands that are supposed to be equivalent, so maybe they're supposed to be that way. Okay, that's nice and dark. So now we're going to do that suggestion leaf. I'm going to go ahead and get our green, even though we've already got it covered in slight blue, which is fine. I'm just going to put a light layer on it for starts. I'm even going to go over those veins I drew, because they'll still be there a little bit, enough for me to be able to see what I'm doing. Because after we've done this shade change into green, we're going to also leave the veins and let them be the lighter part of the painting. So they'll just show up as lighter veins on this. And once I've got that on there, for those of you who maybe haven't seen parts 1 and 2 of this particular project, I'll pull the picture off the wall. Whoops, don't paint on that. That's our line drawing. Come on, off the wall. Off the wall. There we go. Okay, so you'll notice that there is no lotus leaf on this one. This is strictly dragonfly on blossom. Great for photograph. But we're doing a painting, so we want to have just a little bit more interest than just this floating flower in the middle of bluey green space, even if it is a nice peacock color. Anyway, I'm over here. I am drying off the brush. I'm going to shape it and put it back up to dry, because I'm probably not going to use this one anymore here. And we're not quite done, because this is here, but we also want to let it dry just a tiny bit before we pull out, say, this nice number 4 and start working in some more of this. Gonna get some more of the phthalo green, aka viridian hue. And so that I don't have to flip my board under the camera, we're going to start over here on this side where it's hopefully a little drier. And that's a little bit too dark. Wash some of that off. Dry some of that so we don't get crazy amounts of water. There we go. Because we don't want it to blend into the blossom. We need it to stand out from that blossom. Otherwise, people are going to say, what on earth is that? I can't even tell what that is. What is that? A strange piece for a lotus blossom. Pretty sure there's no bulges under a lotus blossom like that. And they would be totally correct. There's not a bunch of bulges underneath lotus blossoms. Unless you've got a frog sitting there. And I'm not in the mood to put a frog in here. We've already got the dragonfly. That should be plenty of nature. Because I like having bugs and small animals, even large or at least hints of large animals in a lot of my botanical paintings, because I just feel like it brings everything to life. Because nature isn't stagnant. You very, 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 very rarely ever see a garden with no bugs. If you do see a garden with no bugs, then there's something wrong with that garden. Because bugs are everywhere that nature is. The only reason you would have no bugs is if somebody's going in there and spraying a bunch of pesticides. Or some other similar habit. Because they like their flowers, they like their plants, they don't like bugs. Sorry folks, can't have flowers and vegetables without bugs. That's how you get your pollination in. If you don't have pollination, then nothing's going to grow, nothing's going to bloom, and before long you have nothing in your garden. I'm a firm and happy practitioner of adding things like bee houses and extra flowers to your garden simply to attract butterflies. Can you eat them? Well, surprisingly, a large number of these things you can. But even if you can't, simply having butterflies, bees, even wasps come and visit your garden, that's how you have a good garden. Because we've had years where the county was burning large swathes of land close by. They were expanding the local highways, and there were no bugs. I mean, just hardly any bugs at all. Worst garden years ever. On the other hand, years where I've had lots of them, lots of bees, lots of wasps, lots of everything, best garden years ever. I haven't seen any in a while. I'm hoping they start coming back because they're done with that road construction. Of course, this year we just had this nasty drought and everything died. I think we're going to lose a lot of trees too. It's depressing. Unfortunately, this kind of nasty hot weather probably means we've lost a lot of our bugs too. Bugs can handle a certain amount of heat, but even they are going to stop at one point and say, okay, this is enough. I'm just going to drop dead now. Not enough water to support me. I'm just dropping dead. Obviously, this fly who keeps coming to visit has no such intentions. It's probably getting water from my little window garden I've got in here. I keep some miniature orchids, and a couple of little tiny roses in the windowsill for inspiration and air cleaning. Because even though this room is surrounded by windows, they're not easy to get to, and they don't get opened very often. But it's been hot enough this year, it looks like at least one of my little roses may have fried. Ooh. Didn't seem to have bothered the rabbit any, which is good. Because they don't usually like hot weather either. Like this is the sort of year where a lot of people who keep things like rabbits and other livestock on their property have just had a really, really lousy year with this heat. Not a nice year for anything alive with this heat. And it started early too. It caught a lot of people off guard. It started getting hot all the way back in May. And while it's not always perfect weather in May, sometimes May is kind of cold and dreary actually. Not this year. This year May decided to go off hot. And it did it fast, not just like, okay, over the next couple of weeks we're going to get warmer weather. It's going to get a little warmer in the future. You know, by the end of the month, maybe we'll be back into the 90s. Oh no. Oh no. We went from lovely 60-degree days. At least I find 60-degree days to be lovely. straight into 90s, upper 90s. Not pleasant at all. Miss Bessie, the rabbit who lives here in the studio currently, is totally spoiled because she's missed all this. She spent this whole horrible summer back here with me because her barn is under renovation. Talk about spoiled rabbit, huh? Spoiled rabbit. Getting attention and treats all the time. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm just laying here by your feet, being quiet now. Leave me out of this. If you insist. Actually, to be honest, it looks like she's taking a nap. I'm surprised the cat hasn't come to join us yet. Sometimes he comes and sits on the rug in the other room because even though she's never actually done anything to him or about him, she's made it quite clear to him that she doesn't want him in her territory. That's how she's looking at the room. It's her territory. Rabbits are highly territorial. They look sweet, but they are highly territorial. Especially since Mr. Spooky would be considered a predator. Not something a rabbit's going to want in its area. Even though Mr. Spooky is a 10-year-old fat cat who couldn't care less. He just likes to know where I am at all times. Gotta know where that meal ticket is. And what I'm doing with this leaf has a name and a technique. I sure wish I could remember what it's called right now. But we are out of hour, or just about, and I'm going to call this pretty good. It's certainly interesting. Background could be a little smoother, possibly a little darker, but I'm going to call this good. And we've also got some water bloom dribbling here because this got a little bit drier than it should have when this came in to meet with it. But I hope you've enjoyed this painting. I hope you've enjoyed painting along with me. All of the links to my Facebook, Instagram, and other useful and relevant sites are going to be listed below. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. And I'll have something new for you the next time I play one of these videos. Leave a suggestion in the box. If I don't already have one planned or drawn up, we'll look and see about putting that in here at some point. And before we go, how about a quick reveal? Because these always look so different once you pull off the tape. So let's pull that tape off real quick. And we can see what it looks like without tape. Little ASMR tape pulling experience. Oops, got a little bit of a tear here. Always got to watch that. That's why we do this at an angle and always away from your paint. You don't want to pull towards your paint. Otherwise, it'll grab that paint and rip your paper right up. And then you've wasted all that time, which is terrible. And up we go. Boop. Yay! Let's turn that sideways so that we can get this into a bigger picture maybe. And let's see, can we enlarge this? Can't zoom in or out in this mode, it says. Okay, so we'll just, we'll put a posted picture of this up later on the regular websites posted below. So I hope you've enjoyed this. See you guys later.